Only an imbecile repairs vehicles without charge for those elderly servicemen, a nearby resident jeered. The auto technician remained silent, merely securing the final fastener. 6 weeks thereafter, the Secretary of Defense materialized before his establishment accompanied by a television crew. What sort of remarkable event did this unspoken act of kindness engender? Luke Henderson cleaned grease from his time-worn hands as he looked over his small car repair shop. At 44, the creases around his eyes had become more pronounced from many years of looking closely at engines under the California sun. His garage in Bakersfield was not luxurious, just 3 service bays, standard tools, and a small customer lounge with coffee that was typically overly potent. Yet it belonged to him. Following 12 years as a mechanic in the Navy, this establishment symbolized all he had striven for. A faded photograph was displayed next to the cash register. Luke's father in his formal Navy attire, his expression serious yet filled with pride. Chief Petty Officer James Henderson had perished during a mission in 1978 when Luke was hardly 3 years old. Luke had emulated his father, enlisting after completing high school and serving on aircraft carriers until a knee injury compelled his return to civilian life. Currently, Luke managed Henderson Auto with understated competence. He seldom discussed his military service, yet fellow veterans identified the military exactitude in his tool arrangement and the way he would stand somewhat at attention when the national anthem played on his small radio. One Tuesday afternoon, an elderly gentleman in a dilapidated Chevrolet entered the premises. Luke instantly recognized the veteran's license plate, Vietnam-era, Marine Corps. The man, presenting himself as Frank Wilcox, elucidated that his vehicle's transmission was severely malfunctioning. "I haven't accumulated much this month," Frank stated, his gaze lowered. "The Social Security payment doesn't go very far these days. Perhaps you could merely ascertain the issue and I can return when I am able to afford the repairs." Luke inspected the automobile, discovering that the transmission required extensive restoration. The cost would exceed $1,200, money Frank clearly lacked. Without remark, Luke commenced dismantling the transmission. 6 hours later, upon Frank's return, Luke simply presented him with the keys. "All prepared," he declared. "How much do I owe you?" Frank inquired, reaching for his well-used wallet. Luke shook his head. "No cost for veterans. Thank you for your service." Frank's eyes became tearful. "Son, I cannot accept this. It must have involved many hours of labor." "You have already compensated," Luke responded quietly. "A long time ago." That evening, Luke fashioned a small, handwritten notice and positioned it by the reception counter. "Veterans, no charge. Thank you for your service." Information circulated rapidly within Bakersfield's veteran circles. Before long, ex-service members started arriving with a range of automotive issues, some trivial, others necessitating days of labor. Luke addressed each case without objection, frequently working late into the night. Not all individuals valued Luke's policy. Rick Dalton, proprietor of the auto shop situated 3 blocks away, began informing patrons, "Henderson is merely doing it for public recognition. Nobody provides services for free unless they are gaining something from it." Luke's neighbor, Tim Barrett, laughed openly when he learned of the complimentary repairs. "Only an imbecile repairs vehicles without charge for those elderly servicemen. They already receive governmental assistance. You are simply being manipulated, Henderson." Even Luke's brother-in-law, during a Sunday meal, expressed apprehension. "Luke, you must consider Sarah and the children. This generosity is likely to lead to your financial ruin." Luke merely smiled, passing the mashed potatoes. "I am indebted to those men and women far more than they will ever be indebted to me." As weeks went by, Luke's accountant highlighted the evident fact: the unpaid work was considerably diminishing his earnings. Some months he scarcely managed to cover his expenses. "Perhaps restrict it to a single day per week," the accountant proposed. Luke contemplated this for a short while before shaking his head. "Certain obligations cannot be settled according to a timetable," he stated. "Those who are kind often bear the greatest burden, yet at times it is the sole path they comprehend." Remain with us to learn of Luke's subsequent experiences. On a damp Thursday afternoon, an aged Ford F-150 pickup, its blue paint faded and rust evident around the wheel arches, pulled into Henderson Auto. The driver, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a military bearing, introduced himself as Ernest Ramirez. He moved with a discernible lack of ease, his right arm marked by a long scar running from wrist to elbow. "The transmission is emitting a sound," Ernest clarified, his voice raspy. "I heard you might be able to assist." Luke assented, observing the veteran's cap Ernest was wearing. "Allow me to inspect it." As Ernest completed the necessary forms, Luke noticed his military identification card visible in his wallet, old yet meticulously preserved in a plastic protector. The glimpse was fleeting, but Luke identified emblems signifying service in both Iraq and Afghanistan, an unusual distinction for someone of Ernest's age. "I will require it by Monday, if feasible," Ernest stated. "I am still employed as a security guard 3 nights a week." Luke guaranteed him the truck would be prepared. After Ernest departed, Luke found the transmission issue to be critical, a complete overhaul necessitating costly components. Nonetheless, he arranged for overnight delivery of all necessary parts and commenced the work. When Ernest came back on Monday morning, the truck was ready. Like those before him, he attempted to pay. And like with the others, Luke declined. "Your money is not accepted here, sir," Luke said, handing over the keys. Ernest observed Luke for an extended moment. "Were you in the Navy?" he inquired. 12 years as an aircraft mechanic?" Ernest nodded, then reached into his pocket and put something on Luke's counter, a challenge coin, the type servicemen give as symbols of esteem. This particular one displayed the emblem of a special operations unit. "You are unaware of the significance of what you have encountered here," Ernest stated softly before departing. That very week, rumors started to spread throughout Bakersfield. Rick Dalton from the rival garage began informing customers that Luke was exploiting veterans for marketing purposes. "He repairs their vehicles without charge, then overcharges everyone else to compensate," Rick alleged. Although Luke's rates remained among the most reasonable in the area, a local business commentator questioned Luke's intentions online. "Is Henderson leveraging patriotism for financial gain? Sources suggest his charitable activities are merely a guise for tax deductions." Luke paid no heed to the gossip, but its impact was undeniable. Several long-standing patrons ceased their visits. At the hardware store, conversations would halt upon Luke's entry. During his son's baseball match, some parents moved away when he took a seat in the stands. "Self-styled hero," one father mumbled, just audible enough to be perceived. Sarah, Luke's wife of 15 years, started collecting the mail before Luke could access it, intercepting the infrequent anonymous letters that labeled him a fraudulent patriot or implied his military service had been overstated. "Perhaps remove the sign for a period," Sarah proposed one evening as they sat at their kitchen table examining invoices. "Merely until this situation subsides." Luke shook his head. That would be an admission of their correctness. The financial pressure intensified. Luke was compelled to dismiss his part-time assistant. Subsequently, he commenced selling some of his specialized equipment to cover the shop's rental expenses. He secured a second mortgage on their modest residence, yet informed Sarah it was merely a refinancing to obtain a more favorable interest rate. One evening, Luke's phone vibrated with a text message from Ernest Ramirez. "You are unaware of whose heart you have touched. Simply persist." The enigmatic message perplexed Luke. A week thereafter, he received a telephone call from an unlisted number with a Washington, D.C. area code. Upon answering, there was a brief silence, followed by a concise message: "Continue your current actions. We are observing." The caller disconnected before Luke could reply. These peculiar communications might have offered Luke some optimism, but they were eclipsed by increasing animosity. One morning, he reached the shop to discover the front window smashed, with red spray paint defacing the remaining glass. Fake hero. Sarah implored him to contact the authorities, but Luke declined. "Submitting a report will not alter perspectives," he stated, clearing away the broken glass. He resumed business the following day as though nothing had transpired. The act of vandalism, however, appeared to signify a pivotal moment. Long-standing patrons who had distanced themselves began to reappear, some expressing regret for their absence. A few veterans organized a weekend assembly at the shop, providing coffee and donuts and assisting Luke in replacing the window. Yet, these minor acts of kindness could not counteract the financial detriment. Luke reviewed his financial records late one night, concluding that he had perhaps 2 months remaining before he would be forced to close the shop permanently. He had not yet informed Sarah, unable to bring himself to confess that their life savings had been exhausted, that their future had been jeopardized for his principles. As he secured the premises that evening, Luke paused by Ernest's truck, which had returned with another problem, a fuel pump issue Luke had not yet found time to address. He ran his hand along the faded hood, questioning whether he was, in fact, a fool. Perhaps they are correct, he murmured to the deserted shop. If you continue to believe that minor deeds can transform the entire world, enter HOP. Luke got to his shop earlier than usual that Tuesday morning. The bank had phoned the night before. His request for a loan extension had been turned down. He needed to begin figuring out how to sell the machinery, how to inform his staff they would soon be jobless, how to tell Sarah their retirement funds were depleted. The coffee machine sputtered as Luke gazed at the account books, the figures stubbornly unchanged no matter how many times he recalculated. Outside, Bakersfield was stirring, the donut shop across the road was lifting its security shutter, and the morning traffic was starting to build at the intersection. Luke had just shut his accounts ledger when he spotted the first black SUV. It entered his parking area slowly, its darkened windows concealing its occupants. Then, a second identical vehicle materialized, followed by a third. Within moments, 6 official-looking SUVs had formed a semicircle around his unassuming shop. Men in dark suits emerged, some conversing into earpieces. One neared the shop entrance, knocking decisively despite the clearly visible open sign. "Luke Henderson?" the man inquired when Luke opened the door. "Yes," Luke responded, a sense of unease tightening in his stomach. Was this related to taxes? Had someone filed a complaint against him? "Kindly step outside, sir. There is an individual who wishes to meet you." His heart thumping, Luke trailed the agent into the morning brightness. A small group had already assembled on the pavement. Across the street, the McDonald's drive-thru had come to a standstill as both patrons and staff stared at the unfolding events. A television crew was positioning cameras. A woman displaying a press credential guided lighting assistance. Additional vehicles arrived, these bearing military insignia. "What is occurring?" Luke inquired, but his query faded as the crowd abruptly made way. A distinguished gentleman in an impeccably fitted suit drew near, escorted by military officers. Luke recognized him at once from news reports and military briefings, the Secretary of Defense, the civilian leader of the entire United States Armed Forces. The secretary proffered his hand. "Mr. Henderson, it is a privilege to meet you." Luke shook the extended hand by reflex. At a loss for words. "America requires more citizens of your caliber." The secretary went on, his voice audible to the now hushed crowd. "Individuals who do not need to be prompted. Individuals who simply take action when they perceive a necessity." The secretary gestured, and an assistant came forward holding a small wooden container. "On behalf of the Department of Defense and a thankful nation, I am here to award you the Distinguished Civilian Service Award, the paramount honor we can confer upon a civilian." Luke stared at the metal within the box, unable to grasp what was transpiring. "Sir, I do not comprehend," he managed to say. The secretary smiled. 3 months ago, you repaired a vehicle belonging to Ernest Ramirez. What you could not have known is that Ernest served in special operations for over 30 years, including missions so classified they'll remain redacted for decades. From behind the secretary, Ernest himself emerged, standing straighter than Luke had seen before, now dressed in a suit with military decorations visible on his lapel. "The coin I gave you," Ernest explained, "is only awarded to those who've earned the highest respect from special operations personnel. I gave it to you because what you did matters more than you know." The secretary nodded. "Ernest's brother served with your father on the USS Constellation in 1978. They were together on the mission where your father was lost." Luke felt his knees weaken. "My father? You knew my father?" Ernest's eyes softened. "James Henderson saved my brother's life during that mission. When I realized who you were, when I saw your father's picture in your shop, I knew why you were helping veterans. You were finishing what your father started." "But there's more," the secretary continued. "The work you've been doing, fixing vehicles for veterans without charge, has allowed many of them to get to medical appointments, job interviews, family reunions. You've changed lives, Mr. Henderson." From the assembled onlookers, a man in his 70s came forward. "My granddaughter's graduation," he stated. "I would not have attended without your assistance in repairing my vehicle." A woman lifted her hand. "My husband's VA medical treatments. He has been cancer-free for 3 years now." One after another, veterans and their relatives recounted the occasions when Luke's generosity had made a difference. The secretary raised his hands to request silence. "When Ernest informed us of your actions, we conducted an investigation. We discovered over 200 veterans whose circumstances were directly enhanced by your efforts. That challenge coin Ernest presented to you found its way to my office, accompanied by a recommendation for this commendation." Luke surveyed the faces observing him. Some neighbors who had previously avoided him, others who had supported him, and many he did not recognize at all. "I merely repaired automobiles," he said plainly. "You accomplished far more than that," the secretary retorted. "You demonstrated that the commitment between this nation and its defenders is not solely a governmental duty. It is a profound obligation we all collectively uphold." The event proceeded with official presentations and addresses. The Department of Defense declared a new initiative, modeled on Luke's efforts, to fund automotive repair services for veterans across the country. A prominent auto parts distributor committed to underwriting Luke's costs for veteran repairs for the subsequent 5 years. Rick Dalton, the rival mechanic who had circulated false claims, neared hesitantly as the assembly started to thin. "Henderson, I was mistaken," he confessed, unable to look Luke in the eye. Other neighbors who had previously ostracized Luke now pushed forward, keen to shake his hand or assert a long-standing acquaintance. Someone had quickly fashioned a sign that read "Home of the Brave" and placed it near Luke's shop entrance. Journalists gathered around, inquiring how it felt to receive such high-level acknowledgement. Luke deliberated on his response before speaking. "I am merely a mechanic who tightens fasteners," he stated. "The genuine honor rests with the men and women who served in uniform." As cameras flashed and the secretary readied to depart, Ernest drew Luke aside. "Your father would be proud," he remarked, "not of the medal or the recognition, but because you comprehended the most vital lesson he embodied." "What is that?" Luke inquired. "That authentic service does not cease when one removes the uniform," Ernest answered. "It is a lifelong dedication. If you believe that sincere kindness invariably finds its way back, type justice." In the period after the secretary's visit, Luke Henderson's existence underwent transformations he had never foreseen. Yet in other aspects, it remained resolutely unaltered. Major automobile corporations proposed dealership ventures to him. Television producers suggested concepts for reality programs showcasing his work. Investment firms recommended franchising Henderson Veterans Auto nationwide. Luke turned down all these offers with the same understated politeness he had consistently demonstrated. "I have no desire for fame," he remarked to Sarah as they sat on their porch swing one evening. "I simply wish to repair vehicles and uphold my commitment." The commitment, unvoiced yet comprehended, was to honor his father's memory through deeds rather than mere words. Luke did consent to certain modifications. A non-profit organization was founded to back his endeavors, enabling contributions to defray the costs of parts and supplies for veterans' automobiles. 2 more mechanics joined his team, both ex-servicemen who had faced challenges securing employment. Luke established a training initiative to impart automotive expertise to young veterans transitioning into civilian careers. "Acquiring a skill rescued me," Luke clarified to his initial cohort of 5 former military personnel. "Possessing something to mend, something to rectify. It provides stability when all else seems precarious." The workshop itself stayed mostly the same. The handwritten veteran's no-charge notice was professionally framed and hung in its original spot by the reception counter. Luke declined to substitute it with anything more ornate, convinced that its unpretentiousness held greater significance than any polished plaque. Ernest Ramirez's aged Ford pickup was given a lasting place in a corner of the workshop. Luke had fully refurbished it, its faded blue paint now shining, an American flag permanently affixed to its hood. It functioned as both a commemorative piece and an instructional aid. Each new veteran trainee acquired fundamental automotive skills by working on various parts of the truck. This vehicle links two eras of service, Luke would explain. It serves as a reminder that we are all components of something larger than our individual selves. In Bakersfield, public opinion had undergone a significant transformation. Individuals who had previously derided Luke's charitable acts now proudly indicated his workshop to out-of-towners. The individuals responsible for vandalizing his window anonymously submitted a written apology along with a contribution to the foundation. One Wednesday afternoon, a young Marine, recently back from an overseas deployment, was seated in Luke's customer lounge, observing him at work. The young man had remained silent throughout his oil change, but as Luke cleaned his hands and handed over the keys, he finally spoke. "The day I lost all conviction," he stated softly, "was the day my truck malfunctioned. I lacked the funds for repairs. I couldn't attend my therapy sessions. I couldn't visit my child." He looked up at Luke. "Then someone informed me about this establishment. You didn't merely repair my truck, sir. You mended something within me, reminded me that commendable individuals still exist." Luke nodded, grasping the significance of those words more profoundly than the young Marine could comprehend. As the workshop's standing increased, journalists would sometimes ask Luke about his guiding principles. Why did he persist in operating the same modest workshop when he could easily enlarge it? Why did he stick to his direct involvement when he could effortlessly transition into a managerial role? "Kindness does not require an audience," Luke would answer. "It merely necessitates a helping hand extended at the opportune moment." On the anniversary of the secretary's visit, the local newspaper published an article detailing Henderson Auto's influence on the community. The concluding paragraph featured a quote from a veteran whose vehicle Luke had mended years prior, before any public acknowledgement had occurred. At times, an act that goes unnoticed can salvage an entire generation's faith. "Henderson did not repair my car for recognition. He did it because that is his character, the type of American who reminds us of who we are meant to be." As I have documented Luke Henderson's narrative over these recent days, I continually pose to myself, what if he had opted for silence? What if he had chosen the safer path, turned away that initial veteran, maintained a low profile, and simply managed his enterprise as everyone anticipated? We would have forfeited a story that urgently requires telling. In a world that appears increasingly polarized, Luke reminded us that certain connections transcend political affiliations, transcend differing viewpoints, transcend the clamor of everyday disagreements. The connection between civilians and those who serve. It is not a matter of concurring with every military operation or policy choice. It is a matter of acknowledging the individual who stood prepared when summoned. Luke Henderson never participated in combat, never discharged a weapon in defense of his country, yet he comprehended something profound about service, that it manifests in numerous ways, that we all possess something to offer to this shared commitment as Americans. What impresses me most about Luke's account is not the instance of recognition when cameras appeared and officials delivered speeches. It is the 3 years preceding that moment, the quiet Tuesday afternoons when he remained late, overhauling a transmission for someone unable to pay. The Saturdays he forfeited attending his son's baseball matches to complete a repair for a veteran needing to reach a medical appointment. The evenings he reviewed invoices at his kitchen table, pondering how he would meet payroll that month. I contemplate how many individuals like Luke Henderson currently exist within our communities, people whose quiet acts of decency pass by unobserved and unacknowledged. The retired educator who tutors struggling pupils without charge. The nurse who remains with terminally ill patients when their relatives cannot be there. The farmer who anonymously donates produce to the food bank. The innumerable hands that offer assistance when no cameras are present. Has an individual in your life ever assisted you without anticipating anything in reciprocation? Someone who materialized at the precise opportune moment, providing exactly what you required, whether it was tangible aid, emotional solace, or merely the solace of their presence. Reflect on them today. Recall their countenance, their voice, their deeds. The world is replete with news of humanity's shortcomings, yet these unassuming heroes compose a distinct narrative with their existences, a narrative of our potential at its finest. There are individuals whose names will never be recorded in history texts. There are acts of kindness that will never become popular on social media or gain official acknowledgement. Yet, owing to these individuals and their actions, our world continues to be a place of optimism rather than desolation. The next occasion you observe someone facing difficulties, remember Luke Henderson. Remember that at times, the most significant contribution we can offer is not grand or theatrical. It is simply being present, utilizing whatever abilities we possess, and conveying without words, "You are not alone in this."